Hi Anuradha, thank you so much for joining us with the CSR Journal. At the beginning, please tell me what you are involved in and the vision behind it.
Certainly. So I'm from Mapmygenome, and we try to provide preventive, personalized healthcare solutions to about 100 million people, where we can actually help people not just understand and diagnose disease, but also to be able to prevent it. So what we are doing is we are trying to study these markers and saying, creating, instead of a janam patri, we create a genome patri, right? So we tell people that here is your big health compass in some form.
Keeping in mind the healthcare situation that is currently prevailing in the country, and it's not such a nice picture, um, what kind of funding do you think is necessary, in which direction, and how can it be done even for smaller companies, not necessarily only big corporates, but smaller companies who want to make a difference? How do you think that can come around?
See, I think there is so much that we can actually do for our population, right? So if you want to, let's say, at least for the kind of work that we do, there is a need for being able to create a very large database for being able to do something like this. But the costs currently are fairly high. But if a corporate could actually help in being able to fund some of that, it allows the one is the cost to come down tremendously, but also two, to be able to prevent disease and thereby increasing productivity in many ways, right? So it is not necessary that people are doing it for just because they want to come up with a new new drug or anything else, but you are also doing it because ultimately it makes a better, healthier team, it makes a better, healthier state, a better, healthier country, right? And I think that's why any company that is involved in being able to say, how do I help in the CSR aspect of it, can also be participating in something like this, because it impacts everybody.
What kind of companies are currently helping you, funding you, and trying to take your research and understanding further?
So at this point, I think we work mainly with healthcare companies. Started to see a lot of corporates actually take this on as more as a wellness activity for their own employees, where either they are funding part of it or they are at least letting their employees know about what can be done. But I think if they actually help fund it, it makes it easier for all three parties, because employees benefit. We can also sell larger numbers and thereby creating a database that can be ultimately useful. But also, I think the corporates will benefit from the productivity. Yes, exactly.
Uh, how important do you think are individuals to the whole CSR aspect?
I think individuals are extremely important, right? At the end of the day, individuals make up a company. Individuals make up a country. At the end of the day, I think that's what everybody contributes towards, right? And if individuals are given that choice to be able to manage their health better, I think, they they ultimately will own that data. They ultimately will be the ones that will make those choices. And from the way I look at it, I think a lot of the changes in healthcare are happening because of the consumer and because of individuals, and so they definitely have a very large role to play in this.
Um, it is important that the individual, being the smallest unit, has to be taken care of course. Do you think it was necessary for it to be made mandatory, where the corporates have to provide some kind of CSR funding, where 2% has been made mandatory about 2 years back? So, do you think to take care should have been voluntary and, not been made mandatory? What do you think about that whole mandate?
I'm not so sure. About whether maybe it was statistically studied and therefore they came up with this number. I'm not too sure about that. But ideally, it should have been voluntary, right? Ideally, it should have been something that comes naturally to a corporate to be able to take care of, activities of not just their own employees but also people outside. Because when you do something for the larger good, you're doing something good for yourself as well, right? And but maybe sometimes people need a trigger, and therefore you've by creating something like this, it forces people to start thinking in that direction, right? So maybe it is probably a good idea to have it mandatory for a few years and then see the effect of what it's going to be like, right? For I guess in some ways similar to some reservation ideas, but the execution of that ultimately is what matters.
You told me about once this genome is done, you are able to understand what the person is, what kind of things are working in the person's body. Um, is there something else also, like another plan that you'll have to make things better after taking into consideration the healthcare situation in our country?
Certainly. So there is one part of our business which is on the infectious disease side, right? So we make very effective, real-time products for tuberculosis and dengue and other infectious diseases, which I think are very necessary. We have about 20% of the the world's burden in terms of tuberculosis within India, and a lot of the current diagnostic tests are not necessarily very accurate. And therefore, you are starting to see a lot of people who sometimes go on these medications and then bring in more resistance towards these drugs, right? And that is going to become a bigger and bigger problem as if you don't have better diagnostics and others.
So a regular corporate is going to be able to help you to a very large extent to remove infections and diseases even at a very grassroots level where technology might not always reach. But are you trying to tell me they can play a very big role? In what way and how?
So, on the infectious disease side, I think it is a very obvious thing, right? Because it is a clear, it's an ability to be able to say, how do I, create low-cost, affordable tests for people to be able to do a tuberculosis or a dengue test, because it also impacts other people that are there around it, right? On the other side, on the personal genomic side, I think it is more understanding that it's affecting them as well, right? And that they're taking care of their own employees in some ways. But if they could help in creation of the larger data, then I think you are helping a much bigger and broader.
In about 8 to 10 words, tell me what does CSR mean to you?
So the way I look at it, I think it is your responsibility to be able to, in some form, equalize the world.
Thank you so much, ma'am.